The sound came first, a sharp crash that sliced through the hum of the rain. A silver tray spun on the wet pavement, glasses shattered, and every eye on the dimly lit street turned toward the woman in the black uniform. She stood frozen under the awning of La Luna, a small restaurant that smelled of espresso and rain. The street behind her shimmered with puddles, reflecting the amber glow of street lamps. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the figure walking slowly out of the storm. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who had once owned her fear. Her name was Amara Johnson. Tonight, the past had found her again. The man approaching wore a dark coat that clung to his shoulders, his hands buried deep in his pockets. Even through the veil of rain, she knew that walk, that tilt of the head, that silence that used to come before words that broke her. The glass at her feet rolled, touching the tip of her shoe. Her pulse thundered. She wanted to run, but her legs betrayed her. Inside the restaurant, the last patron had not yet left. He sat near the door, a man in his 30s with slicked-back hair, a tailored navy suit, and eyes that missed nothing. Leon Varelli. Some called him a businessman. Others whispered the word Mafia with respect and fear. But tonight, his gaze softened when he saw her trembling. He rose slightly in his chair, watching her stare into the storm like a person seeing a ghost. The rain fell harder. The stranger in the coat stopped at the edge of the sidewalk, water dripping from his collar. "You dropped something," he said, his voice smooth and familiar, the kind that carried both charm and threat. Amara's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the doorframe. Leon's chair scraped softly against the floor. He had seen that kind of fear before, silent, paralyzing, the kind that made a person small even when they were standing. He did not know her story, but he understood danger, and in that moment, something in him shifted. Amara's eyes flicked toward the man inside, as if hoping for a wall to appear between her and the storm. Leon stood up fully now, straightening his jacket. The night air carried the scent of gunmetal and wet asphalt, a reminder of a world he had tried to leave behind. He looked at the man in the rain, then at the waitress. She was young, but there was an old sadness in her face, the kind that did not belong to years but to memories. The stranger took another step forward. The distance between them closed like a noose. "Amara," he said, his tone almost tender, "you are hard to find." Her hand trembled against the door. Leon's voice cut through the rain, deep and steady. "That is close enough." The man in the coat stopped. His smile faded. The streetlight flickered once, casting long shadows across the wet ground. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Amara blinked, realizing the stranger had turned his gaze from her to the man inside. Leon's expression was unreadable, calm yet dangerous. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The weight of his presence said everything. Amara took one step back into the light of the restaurant, her body still shaking. The tray lay broken behind her, forgotten. The rain kept falling, relentless and loud, but inside that small pool of light, a new silence began. It was the kind that comes before power shifts, before justice takes shape, before fear learns what it feels like to be seen. Rain drummed against the windows of La Luna, turning the glass into liquid mirrors. The restaurant was almost empty now, only a few chairs stacked by the bar and the faint smell of roasted coffee lingering in the air. The sound of thunder rolled low across the city, shaking loose a faint echo that matched Amara's heartbeat. She stood still near the door, staring at the broken tray, as if it could explain how her past had found her in this quiet corner of New Orleans. The man outside had not moved. He lingered under the streetlight, his shadow stretching across the slick pavement. He waited like he used to, silent, patient, cruel in his calm. Leon watched the entire scene with the detached stillness of someone who had learned to read danger before it struck. His instincts, sharpened by years in a world where hesitation meant death, were already calculating. But what caught him was not the threat itself. It was the way the young waitress stood frozen, her fear too polite to scream. "You should go inside," he said finally. His voice was deep, unhurried, the kind that carried authority without shouting. Amara turned, eyes wide, startled that someone had spoken to her. Her lips moved before sound found her. "I am sorry, sir. I did not mean to—" "You did nothing wrong," Leon interrupted, his gaze flicking toward the window. The stranger was still there, motionless, the rain soaking through his coat. Leon stepped closer to the door. "Lock it." Amara hesitated. Her fingers hovered near the handle. "Who is he?" Leon asked quietly. The question hung in the air. She swallowed hard, her throat tight. Someone I knew, someone I left behind. The way she said it told him more than the words. He had heard that tone before, in women who carried invisible scars, in men who had survived battles no one saw. He nodded once. Stay behind the counter. He walked to the front, his shoes whispering over the tile. Outside, lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the man in the rain. Their eyes met through the glass. Leon saw what he needed to see. The hunger for control, the arrogance of someone who believed fear was ownership. The stranger smirked and took a step closer, pressing a hand against the glass door. Amara gasped. Leon's hand moved slightly toward his jacket, but stopped midway. Old habits had no place here, not anymore. He simply met the man's stare and said calmly, "Leave." The stranger tilted his head, amused. "And who are you to tell me that?" "Someone who does not repeat himself," Leon said, his tone flat, deliberate. The man outside laughed, but it was nervous laughter, the kind that came from someone who recognized the weight of another man's silence. For a moment, they stood like two statues carved by rain. Then the stranger stepped back, eyes sliding to Amara behind the glass. "I will see you soon," he said softly. Leon's jaw tightened, but before he could speak again, the man turned and disappeared into the dark street. The door rattled once from the wind, then stilled. The world exhaled. Amara's hands shook as she locked the door. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe. Leon watched her, the edge of his expression softening. "You can sit down," he said. She nodded, sinking into the nearest chair. The room felt smaller now, as if the storm outside had crept in through the cracks. Leon took a slow breath, then poured 2 glasses of water from the bar. He set one in front of her. "Drink," he said. She hesitated, then obeyed. The tremor in her hand eased slightly. "You do not have to stay," she whispered. "It is not your problem." Leon leaned against the counter, his voice quiet. "Maybe it is. People like him count on silence. I do not." She looked at him confused. "Why would you care?" He stared into the storm beyond the window, the rain glowing like silver strings under the streetlights. "Because I used to be the kind of man people needed protection from," he said. The confession was simple, heavy, and it hung between them like smoke. Amara looked at him differently then, seeing not danger but regret. Outside, the thunder rolled again, softer now, as if even the sky was listening. Leon finished his water and set the glass down gently. "He will come back," he said, "and when he does, I will be here." Amara wanted to protest, but the exhaustion in her bones and the quiet promise in his tone stopped her. The rain outside began to fade into mist, the storm moving east over the river. The city was still breathing, alive and wet and waiting. Inside La Luna, 2 strangers sat in the glow of a single light, both haunted by pasts they could not erase, both unaware that this night was only the beginning of their redemption. The storm passed, but the city did not rest. By the next evening, the streets of New Orleans glistened under the glow of street lamps, puddles catching fragments of light like broken glass. Inside La Luna, Amara moved through her shift as if nothing had happened, but her hands betrayed her calm. Every time the door opened, her shoulders stiffened. Every clang of a plate sounded like a warning. Her co-workers chatted in the back, unaware of the story written in her eyes. She smiled when spoken to, nodded when needed, and hid the tremor in her fingers behind the clinking of coffee cups. She had lived this way before, pretending normalcy while her heart waited for footsteps she feared. What she did not know was that Leon Varelli had not left the restaurant since that night. He claimed he was overseeing renovations, but in truth, he stayed to watch the door. He did not say much. He worked from a corner booth with a notebook and his phone, occasionally glancing up when the bell above the door chimed. The staff treated him with cautious respect, whispering rumors about who he really was. Some said he was an investor, others said ex-military, a few joked he might be law enforcement. No one guessed the truth, that he was a man trying to balance power and conscience like a blade on a fingertip. Around 8:30, Amara stepped outside to take out the trash. The night air was warm and heavy, the sky painted with bruised clouds. She looked down the quiet street, half expecting the same dark coat to emerge from the shadows. Instead, she saw a car parked across the street, engine running, headlights dimmed. Her pulse jumped. She turned quickly, hurrying back inside, but Leon was already standing near the entrance. He had seen her face. "What did you see?" he asked. "A car," she whispered, "across the street." He nodded once and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small phone. He made a call, voice low. Do not make it obvious, but check the alley across from La Luna. I want to know who is sitting there. He hung up without waiting for a reply. Amara watched him, unease mixing with a strange sense of safety. You have people watching? She asked softly. Old habits, he said. Sometimes they are useful. She wanted to ask who he really was, but something in his expression told her not to. The silence between them stretched thin, filled with unspoken questions. Minutes later, his phone buzzed. He listened, eyes narrowing. No plates, no driver. They left when you went inside. He ended the call and slipped the phone away. They are testing you, he said quietly. Seeing if you are still afraid. Amara's throat tightened. They? You mean him? Leon's eyes met hers. A man like that does not act alone. There will be others, people who owe him, people he controls. Her heart sank. Then what do I do? You do not run, he said. Running teaches them that they can move you. You stand your ground, and if they come, they find me first. His tone was calm but final, a promise that sounded like an oath. She looked at him, seeing not the rumors, not the whispers, but the man who had stood between her and a nightmare. Why are you helping me? She asked. He hesitated. Because there was a time when I watched someone hurt and did nothing. I do not get to make that mistake twice. His honesty caught her off guard. It was not the kind of confession that sought forgiveness. It was a declaration, quiet and raw. In the distance, thunder rumbled again, though no rain followed. The air smelled of iron and salt, the scent that comes before something inevitable. Leon walked to the window, staring at the street. Go home, he said softly. Lock your doors. I will be nearby. Amara nodded but did not move. And you? She asked. I will make a few calls, he said. Sometimes peace needs to be negotiated before it is earned. She did not understand what that meant, but she could feel the weight of his words. He turned back toward her, his gaze steady. Do not let fear write your story, he said. You have already survived too much to give it that power. For the first time since the tray had fallen, Amara managed a small, genuine smile. It was faint, but it was real. She picked up her bag and walked out into the night. Leon watched her until she disappeared around the corner, then reached for his phone again. The line clicked, and a familiar voice answered. She was followed, Leon said. Find out who sent him. He hung up before the reply came. The light above the door flickered once, then steadied. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the smell of rain again, but this time it felt like a warning. Leon Varelli was not a man who believed in coincidence. When the same car returned the next night, parked across the street from La Luna under a dying streetlight, he knew the storm had only changed shape. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with the easy rhythm of late customers finishing their meals, but his focus stayed on the window, watching reflections flicker across the glass. Amara worked quietly near the counter, clearing plates, pretending not to notice his gaze or the restless glances he cast toward the street. She was trying to live as if nothing had changed, but fear has a way of seeping through the smallest cracks. Every clatter of dishes made her flinch. Every shadow felt like a memory stepping closer. Leon leaned back in his chair, his thoughts drifting somewhere far beyond the restaurant. Once, he had lived on the other side of this kind of night. Once, he was the reason people flinched. The memory of those years haunted him more than the ghosts he had left behind. He thought of the men who used to stand beside him, of how easy it had been to give orders that changed lives. Power had a way of dulling the sound of conscience. But Amara, in her quiet strength, reminded him of something he had forgotten what it felt like to protect instead of command. She was wiping the counter when the bell above the door chimed. The air shifted. A tall man in a gray suit stepped inside, his shoes leaving small wet prints on the tile. He smiled politely at Amara, but the smile never reached his eyes. Leon noticed the bulge under the man's jacket, a shoulder holster, carefully concealed but not well enough. Leon's voice broke the silence, calm but heavy. You are late, he said. The man blinked, confused, then smirked. You must be the owner. I am looking for someone. Amara froze mid-motion. Leon's gaze did not waver. You found her, he said evenly. The stranger turned his head slowly toward Amara, pretending to glance at the menu. Amara Johnson, right? Someone misses you. Leon rose from his chair. The motion was slow, deliberate. Then he should have come himself. The stranger's eyes flickered, uncertainty creeping into his arrogance. Leon stepped closer, his height and composure filling the room with quiet pressure. "You have 3 seconds to leave," he said. "That is not a threat. It is mercy." The stranger chuckled, but his hand twitched near his jacket. Before he could move, Leon's hand was already there, gripping his wrist with effortless precision. The sound of pain escaped the man's throat as Leon twisted just enough to make a point, not to break. "If you touch that weapon, you will not leave this room standing," Leon said softly. "You will go back and tell him that she is not his to follow. Not now. Not ever." Leon released him. The man stumbled back, shaking out his hand, his pride bleeding faster than his wrist. He glanced at Amara once more, then turned and left. The door closed behind him with a hollow thud. Silence returned, thick and electric. Amara stood motionless, her hands pressed against the counter to keep from shaking. "You did not have to do that," she whispered. Leon looked at her. "Yes, I did." She wanted to argue, but the steadiness in his voice left no room. He took a slow breath, letting the tension slide off his shoulders. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay?" he asked. She hesitated. "My apartment a few blocks from here." "Not tonight," he said. "I will have a car take you somewhere else." She frowned. "You do not even know me." "I know enough," he said simply. There was a weight in his tone that silenced her. The truth was, Leon did not just see a woman in danger. He saw a reflection of every wrong he had once ignored. Protecting her was not about chivalry. It was about redemption. Outside, the car across the street had vanished, swallowed by the night. Leon turned off the lights one by one until only the glow from the street remained. "Go wait in my office," he said. "I will make the call." Amara hesitated, then nodded. As she walked past him, her sleeve brushed his arm. It was the smallest touch, but it left a trace of warmth that lingered longer than it should have. When she disappeared behind the door, Leon stared out the window once more. The rain had started again, light and steady, like the heartbeat of a city that refused to sleep. He whispered to himself, "No one hurts her again," not as a vow to her, but as a promise to the man he once was. The city had gone quiet after midnight, but inside Leon Varelli's mind, the noise never stopped. He sat in his dim office at the back of La Luna, the desk littered with files and old photographs that had no place in the life he was trying to build. A single lamp cast a soft amber glow across the room, revealing the faint tremor in his hands as he poured a drink he would not finish. Outside, the rain whispered against the windows, the steady rhythm of a night that refused to end. Amara slept in the guest room upstairs, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, unaware that Leon had stationed 2 men outside to keep watch. She had protested earlier, insisting she did not need protection, but exhaustion had silenced her argument. Now the world outside the restaurant felt suspended, like a breath waiting to be released. Leon picked up his phone and dialed a number that had not seen his call in years. A gravelly voice answered on the second ring. "You should not be calling me, Varelli," the man said. "You walked away." Leon's tone was calm but edged. "I need information. A man named Daryl Kane. He is following someone under my protection." There was a pause, then a low whistle. "Kane works for Rivas now. You really want to step into that mess again?" Leon's jaw tightened. "If he touches her, I do." The voice chuckled softly, half amused, half worried. "You always did have a death wish. Fine, I will dig. But if Rivas hears your name, you will have company. Let him come," Leon said, ending the call. He set the phone down and stared at the rain for a long time. Redemption was supposed to feel like peace, but all he had found was the echo of the man he used to be. Upstairs, Amara stirred. The dream had come again, the sound of footsteps behind her, the whisper of her name, the suffocating dread that crawled over her skin. She sat up, breathless, her heart hammering against her ribs. The faint hum of jazz music drifted from the radio downstairs, and for a moment, she listened, grounding herself in the present. She wrapped the blanket tighter around her shoulders and looked around the small room. It was neat, quiet, and strangely safe. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and a folded napkin with Leon's handwriting. "You are safe here." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that steadied her trembling. She got up, her bare feet brushing against the cool floor, and walked to the window. Below, she saw 2 black cars parked across the street. Men sat inside, silhouettes barely visible through the misty glass. They were not the kind of men who hid well. Fear prickled at the back of her neck. She turned and hurried downstairs. Leon looked up as she entered, his eyes instantly scanning her expression. "What is it?" he asked. "There are cars outside," she said, "across the street." He stood, walked to the window, and pulled back the curtain just enough to see. Two vehicles, engine lights faintly glowing. His shoulders stiffened. "You should not be up," he said quietly. "I could not sleep," she whispered. "Are they here for me?" He shook his head. "No, they are here for me." She blinked, confused. "I do not understand." He turned to face her fully, the weight of his past finally pressing through his composure. "The man who sent your stalker works for someone I used to know, someone I once called an ally. I thought leaving that world meant it would leave me, but it never does." Amara's lips parted, but she found no words. "So now what?" she asked. Leon's gaze was steady. "Now we wait," he said. "And when they come, I make sure they learn what it means to protect, not to destroy." His calm unsettled her more than anger would have. He poured her a cup of coffee instead of offering reassurance. "Drink," he said softly. "The night is long." She accepted the cup with both hands, the warmth seeping into her fingers. For a moment, they sat in silence, listening to the rain and the distant thunder rolling over the Mississippi River. She studied him, the stillness in his movements, the quiet command in his presence, and wondered what kind of man chose redemption over safety. He glanced at her, as if reading the question in her eyes. "Fear is a strange teacher," he said. "It teaches us who we are when everything else is stripped away." She nodded slowly. Outside, one of the cars started its engine, then drove off into the darkness. Leon exhaled. "Maybe they are testing me too," he murmured. Amara looked at him, the tremor gone from her voice. "Then I hope they learn fast," she said. Leon allowed himself the smallest smile. The city might not have heard it, but in that quiet room above the rain, something had shifted. It was the first time in years that he did not feel alone. By dawn, the storm had drained itself, leaving the streets slick and empty, the air heavy with the smell of rain and iron. Leon had not slept. He sat in the same chair by the window, eyes fixed on the horizon, waiting for the world to move again. The cars were gone, the men outside had vanished, but he knew peace never left without taking something in return. Upstairs, Amara stirred. When she came down, she found him in the same place, his shirt sleeves rolled up, the faint bruises of an old world peeking from his wrists. "You have not rested," she said softly. "Neither have you," he replied. There was no need to pretend anymore. The masks they had worn for survival had already cracked. She sat across from him, hands folded. "What happens now?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "Now, I talked to the man behind this. His name is Rivas. He runs half of the docks and most of the fear in this city. He will not stop unless he hears me." Amara's eyes widened. "You mean you will meet him?" Leon nodded. "Yes, sometimes peace is not given. Sometimes it has to be demanded." She wanted to argue, to tell him it was madness, but she could see the resolve in his face. It was not pride that drove him, it was purpose. "Then I am coming with you," she said. Leon shook his head. "No, you have already done enough. I am the reason this started," she said, voice trembling but steady. "You are not going alone." Leon studied her for a long moment. In her eyes, he saw the same defiance that had once made him dangerous. "If you come, you do not speak," he said. "You listen, and you stay behind me." She nodded without hesitation. By noon, they drove to the edge of the riverfront, where the warehouses stood like sleeping beasts. The sun broke through the clouds, but the light did little to soften the cold. Leon parked the car near an old pier. "Stay here," he said. She looked at him. "You already told me that once," she said quietly. "And you came anyway," he replied with the hint of a smile. "Stubborn. Survivor," she corrected. He stepped out of the car, adjusting his jacket as he walked toward the warehouse door. Two men waited outside, tall, silent, armed. They recognized him instantly. One of them opened the door without a word. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint hum of machinery. Rivas sat at a long table, surrounded by a few loyal faces. He was older than Leon remembered, heavier, but his eyes were still sharp as blades. "Leon Varelli," Rivas said, spreading his hands. "I thought you were a ghost." "You made it difficult to stay one," Leon replied. Rivas laughed, a low rumble that did not reach his eyes. "You have nerve walking into my house after disappearing all these years." "I came to end something," Leon said. "You sent a man after a woman under my protection. That ends today." Rivas leaned back, smirking. "A woman? That is what brought you back? You, of all people, standing up for some waitress?" Leon's voice did not rise, but it carried weight. "Her name is Amara, and she does not belong to your world." Rivas's grin faded. "Neither do you, but here you are." The silence that followed was long enough for everyone to feel it. Outside, the sound of a car door closing broke the tension. Rivas frowned. "You did not come alone." Leon turned slightly, his expression unreadable. Through the open doorway, Amara stepped into the light. The men near the table moved instantly, hands on their weapons, but Leon raised a hand. "She stays," he said. Amara stood beside him, small but unyielding. Rivas looked her over with mild amusement. "She has courage, I will give her that." Leon's eyes narrowed. "She has more than courage. She has something you cannot buy, dignity." The room went still. Rivas's smirk faltered. "You have changed," he said finally. "No," Leon replied. "I just started remembering who I was before I forgot." The old tension between them lingered, two men who once shared power now divided by purpose. Rivas leaned forward. "So what now? You think words can fix what blood built?" Leon's tone was quiet but final. "No, but they can stop what blood destroys." Rivas studied him, then nodded slowly. "You always did talk like a preacher with a gun." Leon did not smile. "I threw the gun away." Rivas's gaze shifted to Amara, then back to Leon. "Then you better pray she is worth it." Leon's answer was simple. "She is." The air inside the warehouse felt heavy again, but not with fear, with decision. For the first time in years, Leon walked away without looking back. The rain began again, slow and steady, washing the dust off the city one drop at a time. When Leon and Amara left the warehouse, the city felt different, quieter, like something had shifted beneath the surface. The sun had begun to sink behind the skyline, throwing streaks of gold and crimson across the river. They walked without speaking, both too full of words that had no place yet. The meeting with Rivas had not ended in blood, but neither had it ended clean. There were debts that could not be erased, only postponed. Leon knew that. Amara knew it too, even if she did not fully understand the cost. When they reached the car, she turned to him. "Is it over?" she asked. Leon's eyes were on the horizon. "Nothing ever ends, it just changes shape." His voice carried the calm of someone who had seen too much to believe in peace. She wanted to be angry at that answer, but she could not. He had carried her through a storm she never could have faced alone. Now the silence between them was not fear. It was something like understanding. Back at La Luna, the air smelled of fresh paint and coffee grounds. The restaurant was closed, but the warmth of the place felt alive, as if the walls themselves had watched everything unfold. Leon locked the door behind them and walked to the window, staring at the empty street. "You should go home," he said quietly. Amara shook her head. "Home does not feel safe anymore." He turned toward her, the lamplight softening his expression. "Then stay until it does." She hesitated, then nodded. The smallest smile tugged at the corner of his mouth before fading. The sound of rain began again, tapping gently against the glass. Outside, a shadow moved across the street. Leon saw it first. His instincts flared before his mind caught up. "Get down," he said sharply. Amara ducked just as the front window cracked from a single bullet. The glass held, but the message was clear. He moved fast, pulling her toward the back hallway. "They are not finished," he said under his breath. Amara's heart pounded. "Why are they still coming? You talk to him." "Because talking does not scare men like Rivas," Leon said. "Only consequences do." He reached for the phone and dialed a number. "Pull the cars to the alley now." He hung up and looked at her. "We are leaving." "Where?" she asked. "Somewhere they cannot find you," he said. She stared at him. "And you?" He met her gaze. "They already found me long ago." The sound of engines grew outside. Within minutes, two black sedans rolled up behind the restaurant. Leon guided her to the back door, his hand steady on her shoulder. "When this door opens, you run straight to the car. Do not look back." "I am not leaving you," she said fiercely. "Yes, you are," he said softly. "Because this is where I stop running." Their eyes met, an entire conversation passing in silence. Then he opened the door. The air outside was cold, carrying the scent of rain and asphalt. She ran as he told her, the sound of her footsteps echoing through the alley. Behind her, Leon turned toward the street, where three figures had begun to emerge from the shadows. He did not reach for a weapon. He only stood his ground, the rain catching in his hair, his shoulders squared. Somewhere deep inside, he felt no fear, only clarity. Redemption had finally taken shape, not as forgiveness, but as protection. The echo of engines faded as Amara's car disappeared into the night. Leon looked up once. whispered a single promise to the storm. No one hurts her again. Then the street swallowed the sound. The night stretched thin, quiet except for the soft hum of rain against metal. Leon stood at the mouth of the alley watching the three figures close in. They moved with confidence, expecting fear, but what they met was stillness. One of them spoke first. "Rivas sends his regards," the man said. Leon's reply was calm. "Tell Rivas he should have come himself." The man hesitated. Something in Leon's tone unsettled him, the certainty of someone who no longer feared what came next. Before they could step closer, headlights flashed at the end of the street. Two black cars turned the corner, engines growling like thunder. Leon's men stepped out, silent, disciplined. Within seconds, the balance of power shifted. The three intruders froze, realizing too late that they were outnumbered. Leon walked forward until he stood inches from the first man. "This ends tonight," he said. "Go back to Rivas and tell him the city remembers mercy. He should try it sometime." The man swallowed, nodded once, then backed away. The others followed, fading into the mist. When they were gone, Leon looked up at the rain and exhaled, the tension draining from his body. He turned to his men. "Make sure she gets to the safe house," he said. "No one follows her." They nodded and left. Leon remained, alone in the rain, his shirt clinging to his skin, the street around him glowing under the amber light. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his choices lift, not completely, but enough to breathe again. Miles away, Amara sat in the back seat of the car, watching the city lights blur past the window. Her reflection stared back at her, pale but steady. The driver did not speak, and she did not ask where they were going. For the first time in a long time, she was not running from fear. She was running towards something that felt like freedom. When the car stopped near the riverfront, the driver turned. "Mr. Varelli said you would be safe here." She nodded, stepped out, and looked at the water shimmering under the moonlight. The city was silent, the storm beginning to fade. Somewhere behind her, sirens wailed in the distance, but they sounded far away, like echoes from another life. She closed her eyes, whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not for rescue, but for the man who had chosen redemption over ruin. The wind picked up, cool and gentle, carrying with it the faint scent of rain and coffee from a place she once called her second home. By morning, the storm was only a memory. The streets of New Orleans glistened beneath a pale sunrise, the air thick with the smell of rain and redemption. Amara stood by the river, the wind lifting her hair as the city slowly came back to life. Behind her, the safe house waited, quiet and warm, a fragile piece carved from chaos. She closed her eyes and saw his face, the way he had stood beneath the rain, unarmed but unafraid, a man who had once lived by power, now choosing to live by grace. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rang from the harbor, and she whispered his name into the wind. Leon Varelli did not appear in the news. No headlines, no stories, no trace. But rumors spread quietly through the streets that the man who once ruled the city's shadows had vanished after protecting a woman no one else would. Some said he fled the country. Others said he walked into the storm and never came back. Amara believed something different. She believed he had finally found peace in the place where mercy met justice. Weeks later, La Luna reopened. The walls had been repaired, the lights glowed softer, and a small framed photograph hung by the counter. It was of the river at night, the water dark and endless, a single line written beneath it in his handwriting. "Power means nothing without grace." Every evening, Amara lit a candle beneath that frame, not in mourning, but in gratitude. She did not cry. She did not pray for his return. She simply carried his promise forward, one act of kindness at a time. The night he stood in the rain had changed everything. He had the power to destroy, but that night, he chose to protect. This was not just her story. This was a story about redemption, about the strength it takes to choose humanity over fear. This was a black story worth telling.